hope you enjoyed that TED Talk. I know every time I watch it, I still get chills. 25 years that information was available, the research that Alice conducted, yet we didn't change our practices. It's just incredible when you really think about it. But what I love most about that TED Talk is the process that Alice and George and the relationship that Alice and George built to be really good thinking partners. And I want you to maybe pause and think about who is your thinking partner? Who is someone that you can bounce ideas off of? Who is someone that you go to try to get them to intentionally prove you wrong, to give you more confidence in your ideas, or to identify blind spots in your ideas where you need to dig in more and get information. So what we're going to do now is transition into talking about what can we do to create a balanced process. We'll first start by reflecting on what Alice did. So thinking back through the TED Talk, what are some of the things that Alice did in order to create a very balanced and objective decision-making process? Well, one thing that she did is she found George and she asked him to prove her wrong. So she intentionally found someone that was very different. They had very different personalities, and they had an agreement that they were going to be thinking partners, and they were going to essentially try to prove each other wrong and provide that constructive feedback. I have one of my employees, and she's more of a team member, coworker, and friend, but our personalities are very different, and our brains operate in a very different way. And I love to brainstorm with her because I know that she's going to identify the blind spots or the areas that I've skipped when thinking through ideas. She has some incredible ideas, and we call ourselves the dynamic duo because together we feel like we're able to really launch big ideas and implement them well together. So think about who your thinking partner can be and go ask them to consider that role and to provide you with that feedback. Alice also actively sought disconfirmation. So if I were to go to the internet and try to confirm or deny a belief that I had, if I wanted to go online right now, and not saying either way if this is what I believe, but if I were to go online and say I was trying to find information that the COVID-19 vaccine was not safe, if I put that in, I'm going to find lots of information that will say why it may not be safe, right? And that's a more recent example. But thinking about anything that we would like to try to find more confirmation for, if we can change that and try to actually disprove our beliefs. So if you hear something and go, I don't know if that's right, I'm actually going to go find the information to see, why it is safe or it isn't safe. So let's say there's a vaccine that you believe is safe, and you want to go out and see if there's any information out there stating that it's not safe. So actually taking this mindset and trying to disprove our beliefs or opinions versus just searching for the information to confirm what we already believe, which we can always do. There's so much information on the internet. You're always going to be able to find information that can support whatever your belief is, right? That also ties into finding credible sources and ensuring that it's not just some blog, but it's actually backed by a credible institution of some kind. Only by not being able to prove her wrong could he give her the confidence to prove that she was right. I love that quote from this TED Talk, that in order, he went through these processes to really try to prove her wrong. And when he wasn't able to do that, Alice knew and trusted George enough that he would have found any loophole or blind spot, whatever he could have found, and he didn't. That means that I can have the confidence in my knowledge and my abilities and my decisions and my ideas. So I really like that part of the TED Talk. Alice was prepared to be wrong. She knew that that was a possibility. In the book that I mentioned in the last video, Adam Grant, he talks about how he actually enjoys being wrong. And whenever he finds that he's wrong about something, he tries to take the approach of, wow, I have a new discovery. This is really cool. I want to dig in and learn more about this. So instead of being upset if we're wrong, use it as an opportunity to say, okay, neat, I get to learn something new. See conflict as thinking and get good at it. I'm talking about productive and healthy conflict that we can have inside the organization, inside of our teams where we can really say, okay, coming together, let's talk through all the different angles of this issue. I may come up with my idea, my belief, whatever, because I only have my perspective, which we'll talk about here in a second. I can't simulate or fully understand and appreciate the perspective of others. So I need those other people to come together, and that's going to create some conflict because we have different worldviews, different perspectives, but it's going to help us get to that better end goal. So having diverse teams, having diverse personalities, building that foundation of trust is going to enable for us to have some really healthy and really productive conflict. So how can we create our own balanced process for problem solving? So thinking about what we learned from that TED Talk and Alice, what are some things that we can do to ensure that we're taking an objective approach to problem solving with the teams that you participate in? Normally, if we were in person, I would have lots of flip charts all over the place. We'd get into groups and brainstorm this together. We don't have that, but that's okay. The very next best thing we can is you can pause the video and comment. So if there's something that you and your team are doing at work that's been really effective, I want you to pause the video and make that comment so that you can share it with your peers in this course. Also thinking through ideas, maybe it's having a thinking partner. So go ahead and pause the video now and comment on this part of the video and tell us what are some things that you can do to ensure that you're going to have a balanced process going forward. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to add in some comments of things that we can do so that we can all take a more objective approach to problem solving. I want to share one tip with you, especially if you have teams with different personalities, you have some extroverts, introverts, and if you tend to have one or two people in the room that may dominate discussions, this is a really good tip to help get all of the ideas out there. So something that I do for any type of brainstorming session or anytime I want to really get feedback from everyone in the team, not just one or two people who tend to speak the most during meetings, I use sticky notes. And so what I'll do, let's say we've gone through the end of a project and we want to do a post-mortem and review what worked, what didn't work. I'm going to get a bunch of sticky notes, give it to my team, and I'll say, okay, I want everyone to put down what are 2 to 3 things that went really well in this project. And they write down one idea per sticky note, only one idea per sticky note because then you're going to cluster them together. And then I may say, what was one challenge that we faced? Or what's something we could have done better to make the project even more effective? And everyone will write down their one idea per sticky note. And then they stick them on the wall. And what you can do is go through those sticky notes and you'll probably start to see some themes emerge. And so you can group them and then facilitate an open dialogue discussion with your team. But that sticky note activity, it's done in silence and it gives everyone the opportunity to participate in the brainstorming session. So that's one little trick that I'll share with you that's been really helpful for me and my team. Now we're going to transition and wrap up this whole module on balanced processing by talking briefly about bias and perspective. I can't really end this module without talking about these two things because our decision making and our ideas and all of this is certainly subject to our bias and perspectives that we have. But first, I want to hear from you, what is the difference between bias and perspective? So go ahead and pause the video now and comment and tell us what is the difference in your mind between bias and perspective. Thanks for sharing those. I can't wait to dig in and see what you put. So we'll start off with the impact of bias first. We'll define it and break down what happens when we can experience that bias. So bias is a disproportionate weight in favor of or against an idea or a thing. So we know that sometimes our biases, we can be aware of them, and sometimes we're not aware of them. And this is why it's important to have that thinking partner to bring a group of people together so we can hopefully help identify and check some of those biases. Our biases can lead to a decrease in a number of things: trust in our teams, credibility, perceptions of equity. So all of these things, whenever we don't understand our bias and how it can play into a certain situation, it can have a negative impact on trust, our credibility, perceptions of equity. Bias can also be kind of back to that Dunning and Kruger chart. Whenever we know just a little bit of information, maybe we only know a little bit of information from one type of source, and that's going to bias our perspective on whatever the topic is that we're talking about. If you think of some of the issues in politics, one of the best things I can suggest is watching lots of different news sources from all sides of the equation, because then you're able to really say, okay, here's my opinion on this issue, and I have gained knowledge from this side and this side and this side and all around it and in between, and I feel good about my belief because I've been able to take in all of this information. Our bias is when we typically are only taking that information from one specific area or one specific experience. Now let's talk about the impact of perspective. So perspective is a particular attitude toward or a way of regarding something. So it's typically our point of view. We get our perspectives through our unique experiences, which is our worldview. So think of a time when you broaden your perspective with a specific experience. So what did you learn? When there was some time when you went out and you tried to get additional information, or you knew that you were only looking at an issue from this lens. So maybe you work in engineering and you only know this project from an engineering lens, and so you went to go visit with IT to understand more of how this project impacted them. That would be an example of trying to broaden your perspective. So the difference between a perspective and a bias, a bias is something that certainly can have a negative impact versus a perspective. This is how I see the world. This is my point of view. It's really important that we can't always completely understand other people's perspectives or worldview. We can try to, and we can certainly appreciate other people's perspectives. It's different from ours. George's perspective was very different from Alice, and that's why Alice found George, so that they could think collaboratively together. So thinking of that time when you broadened your perspective, what did you learn? So maybe you decided to watch 30 minutes of MSNBC, 30 minutes of Fox, 30 minutes of CNN, whoever it may be. What did you learn from that experience? And what are examples of things that we can do to broaden our perspectives at work? I've worked in human resources, and I feel like oftentimes we'll hear conversations, we've all heard these conversations of, can you believe that they're hiring another employee in that department? What are they doing all day? COVID has, impacted their area so much, I don't even know what they're working on. So a lot of times we'll jump to conclusions or accusations about another department, and they don't really have as much work as we do because we're the busiest. And so there's opportunities at work where we can broaden our perspective by interacting and collaborating with different groups inside of our organization. So that was a quick wrap up and summary, but with balanced processing, again, I encourage you to figure out, especially when you are working on really impactful and important ideas and decisions inside of your organization, what can you do to ensure that you're taking a balanced process, objective approach to decision making? Next, we'll wrap up this Authentic Leadership course by talking about an internalized moral perspective.